The Adulting with ADHD podcast is not a substitute for medical advice. Please see a medical professional if you think you have ADHD or if you have questions about your current treatment. To support this podcast or to access the podcast archives, visit patreon.com/adultingwithadhd. This is the Adulting with ADHD podcast, self-empowerment for people with ADHD.
Thank you again for being here. Guys, I want to introduce you to Dusty Chipura. You probably have heard of her. She's an ADHD coach and a creator. And she's on, I know I watch you on Twitter and TikTok. And I'm sure you're all over the place. And we're going to talk about all of the things that you've been up to lately. I wanted to set this up a little bit. So I caught you recently at the ADHD Women's Palooza, which was super awesome. And you gave a really good talk on ADHD and pregnancy. So a lot of my questions are kind of follow-ups to that talk you gave. And yeah. And for those of you listening, I'll link you guys to what I'm talking about in case you want to catch it, which I highly recommend if it impacts you. I think it was wonderful. And so my first question was, and just to preface this, I wrote these questions a very long time ago. So there's a couple of them where even I don't remember what I meant at the time, but I'm sure we'll figure it out together.
Jinx, you owe me a Pepsi.
All I have is Diet Coke, but yeah, I do remember you discussing the idea of a prosthetic environment and how this is a tool that we can use when we're pregnant with ADHD. Do you want to explain that concept a little bit?
Yeah, so it's something I heard Dr. Russell Barkley talking about that I really liked, which was just the idea that like if you were missing a leg, you would have a prosthetic leg, right? If you just sort of like that idea that if there's something that's not sort of working the way that we want it to work about our brains, like time management or prioritization, we know that external accountability and external reminders really work for us. So we need to create that. Hey, you need to be quiet. Sorry, that's going to happen because we need that our environment gives us those external cues, right? Yeah. So whether that setting up a lot of reminders, setting up external accountability, just like making the environment work for us so that we can do the things we intend to do.
Absolutely. And I know as you were speaking, I can think of several things throughout my day that are set up that way. How does that apply to pregnancy in your experience? What have been some helpful external kind of not triggers, but cues that helped you along?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it probably depends on the person, but just in like really small ways, just some small examples are like something like taking a daily prenatal vitamin, right? Yeah. If you're already in the habit of taking meds daily, that might be really easy for you. But keep in mind, lots of women and pregnant people, but not all of them, are maybe going off their ADHD medications or different medications when they're getting pregnant. So that cue isn't there anymore, right?
Right.
So like for me, it was often like, did I take my prenatal vitamin today? And I couldn't remember. So one of the things I did was I lived across the hall from my mom. So I gave her the prenatal meds. And I said, could you make sure I take one of these every day?
Yeah.
Right? So then she was in charge of that, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's things like those pill lids, right? So there's those pill lids that you can get that tell you how long it's been since you took a pill, right? When you put the thing back on, it's got a timer so you know whether you took it or not, right? But yes, sort of anything related to what you're struggling with your ADHD during pregnancy, right? So whether it's reminding yourself to like not take on extra projects because you're going to be really tired, or like eat or not eat certain foods, right? I'm trying to think of like some other examples that might be relevant to pregnancy. I know for me, one of the things that was really hard to keep in mind was all the things I was and wasn't supposed to be doing, like don't take ibuprofen, right?
Right.
Exactly, right? Even stuff like deli meats, right? There's so many like little things you have to kind of like, remember.
Yeah.
And so I'm a really big fan of delegating, because too often with ADHD, like we don't ask for help. Like we don't know when to ask for help, or we're embarrassed to ask for help, or we also feel like it's going to be too much work to explain to the other person like what the help we need is. And I'm definitely a really big fan of getting other people involved as often as you can, because so often like our friends are really willing to help us out and do stuff for us, right? Yeah. Many people with ADHD, like we go out of our way to help others a lot, and we don't like take that help back. Like we don't, we want to do everything on our own. We don't want to like be a burden to anyone, right? So it's a great time to just say like, hey guys, like I'm struggling with getting enough movement. Could we set up like a daily walking date or a weekly swimming date, right? And obviously that's, again, a little different under COVID. But I think like sort of externalizing and creating a prosthetic environment could look like sort of whatever you need it to look like. But
Yeah.
it's about just getting comfortable with the idea that you're probably not going to remember, and like stop counting on your brain to be the thing that cues you, and start getting comfortable accepting that like you might need a lot of cues. You might need those things that are those prompts, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking of what kind of things I was using at the time. And it's really hard to remember that time, but I do remember working in an office environment at the time and being really important. My prosthetic environment was basically making sure everyone knew like these were my limits. I had recently been promoted to manager, and so that's a perfect those are grounds that are primed for people putting more and more on you. And so from day one, it was like these are my parameters. I'm kind of like low power mode. I don't know who coined that term, but just the idea. I think it was Gretchen Rubin mentioned it on one of her episodes, but like a low power mode, like if you're an iPhone, you're on low power. So I kind of kept it on low power mode as much as I could. Yeah. So I love that prosthetic environment because especially if you have family members or partners who can be your stand-in for a lot of things. I think I'm not sure what it's like for you, but I know culturally for me, it wasn't really like that in my family. And I married into my husband's Hispanic, and it's more normal for his family. Like they all stand in for each other, and it's the most natural thing in the world. It was really hard for me to get used to because growing up in my household, I always, like you said, felt like a burden. Like, oh gosh, I don't want to ask anyone. But there's so many cultures throughout the world that do that, and it really, that to me, it's like there's no other way, right?
And like even during pregnancy, there's a lot more appointments, doctor's
Oh
appointment,
God, yeah,
midwife, right? All these different
yeah,
scans. So if you have a friend who's really organized, why not delegate that to them and say, hey, can you make these appointments for me? Can you be the person in charge of them? Can you make sure I'm going to them? Like, can you check in on me? Right? Like those are ways of being an adult with ADHD, and adulting with ADHD is a
right,
valid way of adulting, right? It doesn't mean you
yeah,
have to do everything on your own just because that's how another person does it, right?
absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned doctors because my next question, I spoke about this with another guest who she was speaking about, she ended up in the emergency room a lot, and just how hard it is to communicate with doctors when you're dealing with a condition. In this case, we're talking about pregnancy. Like you said, there's so many appointments, there's so many things to remember to take care of yourself. And then you have all these specialists. You have your OBG, your family doctor. If you're, what's the term when you're older and pregnant?
They call it
Geriatric.
a pregnancy. Yeah.
So if you were like me and you were geriatrically pregnant, you had a fetal specialist on top of it. And then if you get complications like I did, you go in twice a week, and there's like all this incredible stuff. So back to my question, in your experience, are there any things you've been able to do to help better communicate with doctors? Have you ever had trouble communicating with doctors or anything?
Yeah. One of the things for me that I found was I just kept forgetting all my questions, right? Like I would have all
Yeah.
these questions for the doctor, and like, sure, it's a great idea. People be like, oh, just write them down in like the notepad function of your phone. That's great. And then I'll forget to check my phone, or my phone is dead. And so I don't end up asking those questions So I really struggled to remember my questions. And I think like if you know yourself and your ADHD really well, you might have certain concerns, and you might want to convey things that will and won't work for you. And if those things are like a little unusual, the doctor may not understand why they're important. They may not take your concerns seriously. And so here in Canada, we have a lot more codified. We have a lot more going on with like midwives and doulas too, right? So we have sort of a
Nice.
system where you can work with an obstetrician or you can work with a midwife. And so my understanding is that I think like sort of midwifery in Canada is quite progressive, and they're a lot more inclusive of various gender identities. They're more sensitive to kind of like settler and colonial dynamics as well as like neurodiversity, but they're still probably working on it as well. But so
Yeah.
I think it can be really challenging if you're not feeling heard or understood, or your concerns are being minimized, right? Certain concerns that you have. But so one of the things, I don't know if you one of the things I have been working on is a
Yeah.
pregnancy journal that I'm actually going to be releasing on Mother's Day. So it's coming out pretty
Oh,
soon.
that's so cool.
It's done. We're making it digitally fillable. So I had come up with this idea of a pregnancy journal for people with ADHD specifically a while ago.
Yeah.
And I got the whole thing ready, but I wanted it to be as comprehensive as possible. So I partnered with a friend of mine who is actually the head of the Midwives Association of Canada. And I had her come on board for the project to kind of just help add in that medical aspect that, I'm not an expert at.
Yeah.
So now it's done, and we're going to be releasing it as a digital fillable download on May 8th that people can either print, but it's quite big. Like it's like over 200 pages.
Yeah.
We're also going to be looking at making it like a thing that people can order like from Amazon, like in print, like an actual plan, kind of like a planner.
Yeah.
And that's, again, sort of creating that prosthetic environment. So it's a really comprehensive thing that has a note page for like questions you want to remember to ask your doctor. And like every week there's like prompts to help you because of limited working memory, we sometimes forget what you get. That so often someone says, "Hey, what's your favorite band?" And you're like, I know there are bands that I like, but I can't even think of it. Right. Or says, "What do you want to eat?" And you're like, I know I like food, but my mind is blank. Right. If someone says, "Do you want grilled cheese?" You can be like, "No, I don't want grilled cheese." Okay. Do you want something with meat? Okay. No, I don't like, right. The types of questions and prompts can help get that working memory going. So the journal is full of those types of prompts. Like, what do you need to do this week? What are you forgetting? Like, what do you need? What's really important to you to like attend to? Who's helping you feel supported this week? Who's making you feel a little uncomfortable this week? Like, what do you want to make sure that you ask your doctor? Just a lot of prompts to kind of help you stay on track with those things that might be challenging for you during pregnancy.
That is outstanding. And I'm really glad you mentioned when it comes out, because I might drop this episode. I might push it up since it's so timely. That's amazing. The 8th is a Saturday. So yeah, that is.
These days, I've found myself needing quicker access to therapy from the safety and comfort of my home. This is why I started using BetterHelp for my immediate therapy needs. They will assess your situation and match you up with a licensed professional therapist, one who you'll likely start communicating with in 24 hours or less. It's more affordable than traditional therapy, and financial aid is available. You can do it through text or chat if you don't like phone calls or video appointments. To get started and to save 10%, go to BetterHelp, HELP.com/ADHD adulting.
That's so cool. That actually reminds me, when I first had my child, I had something where I had to keep track of all the, I'm sure you did too, the feedings and how much they pooped and how much they peed and how much you fed them. Like, it just was, oh my gosh, that's so challenging for someone with ADHD. And so oh my gosh, I had a book it was a journal it was a poop journal. Like, it was just like, did she eat today? Did she poop today? And I mean, those sort of tools are just so helpful. So that I'll be really interested in seeing that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's sort of our next project to tackle, is like more of a postpartum thing. There's nothing really in the journal the postpartum experience yet. It got so big, just being what it was. But the funny story, right? Same thing here. So a couple days after my daughter was born, they have like a public health nurse follow up with you by phone.
Yes.
So she calls me and she goes, is your daughter peeing? Is she pooping? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, well, when did she last poop? How many times has she pooped? And I'm like, I don't know.
Oh my God.
She's been pooping. Like, it's been fine. Well, what do you mean you don't know? Well, I don't know.
Why would you know?
Was it a couple hours? Was it 6 hours? I don't know.
Yeah.
The nurse was so befuddled, and I was like, look, I have ADHD. I don't know if something happened half an hour ago or if it happened yesterday. But it's fine. Like, I know I know it's important. So I've been monitoring it. She seems happy. Like, she's eating, she's pooping, I know it's fine. But again, like, this is where I think like something different works for everyone, because I did eventually get an app that like tracked all that stuff, and it helps you track which side you fed on and all that kind of thing if you're doing breastfeeding, chest feeding. But for me, sometimes it's easier to just whip off a text to somebody than like go open an app, and you've always have to set up those apps, or like if you put the journal down and then you can't find it. So sometimes it's literally like, again, get a friend invested to like keep track of that for you, and all you have to do is like shoot them a quick text that says 5 p.m. poo, right? If that's what feels easier for you, or if it's a whiteboard, like something different is going to work for everyone. So it's just about kind of figuring out like, what is the thing that you will actually do in the moment, right? Instead of trying to force yourself to do something that doesn't work for you.
Absolutely. And I would tack on there, I email myself a lot. Like, email I'm a slave to I'm inbox zero. I can't stand to have unread things. So that's kind of my to-do list. But yeah, I did the same thing. I still do about texting a friend. So my kid gets constipated a lot. If she doesn't drink Miralax every morning, she gets backed up. She's like 4. And My mother-in-law and I joke about just how invested we are in her poop schedule. And so we do text each other, and it's so convenient to have that timestamp of like, she pooped at 10 o'clock, we're good. So definitely good.
Exactly.
Good for the mom, good for the baby, good for everyone. So that is awesome. And as far as the doulas and the midwives, I'm really glad you talked about that. And you had mentioned some creative ways to access those so that they don't have to be cost prohibitive. You said that a lot of them they might work with you. They might have like a sliding scale situation or something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think first it's important, like a doula doesn't replace a midwife. A doula is more like in addition to a midwife. And you might think of a doula like a pregnancy coach, right? So it's not a must have, it's a nice to have, I think, but can really probably change your birth experience. And doulas, there's lots of, just like coaches, right?
Yeah.
Training, they're going to want clients, right? And they're going to need that practice. So there's probably lots of doulas out there that are willing to work for sliding scale or for free for the experience, right?
Yeah.
And if you can't sort of afford, or there's not a doula available, you can still put together like a birth team, right? Like if you were getting married, right? Or you were coordinating some big event, you might get people involved and give them roles, right? And why not do that for your pregnancy, right? I think pregnancy is a time to accept like limitations, like not in a negative way, but like pregnancy is hard on everyone. And as a neurodiverse person, you're going to have different challenges. So like pregnancy is a great time to just really embrace and get comfortable with like, okay, I can't do everything myself, and I'm going to have a better time if I'm comfortable delegating, right? So I'm going to ask my friend Judy to like remind me to take my meds every day. I'm going to ask my friend Timmy to like help me schedule my appointments. I'm going to ask my friend Billy Joe Jim Bob to like go walking with me every day, right? Why not create it? So if you have a good support network and you have a good team, right, you could ask friends. And I think probably, midwives and doulas are probably going to be more comfortable offering sliding scale, because I think there's a big sort of culture of wanting to provide community care and make it accessible in it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's harder if you maybe you don't have access to that, and maybe you don't have a great friend group. That's going to make it harder.
Yes.
But now than ever, like the digital world is full of neurodiverse spaces, right? Whether that's on Twitter or on somebody's Discord, there's groups, there's many digital spaces where like lots of Facebook groups too, where you can ask for help.
Yeah.
So just, again, getting comfortable finding where your people are and reaching out to them and saying, hey, like, let's support each other. Because a lot of the times people are shy of asking other neurodiverse people to do something for them. But the truth is that we all get that, like, there's this great coach, Barbara Luther, and she calls it the ADHD others over self tendency.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to do something for someone else than it is to do it for yourself. So like, let's leverage that, right? Let's get other people to help us, and we'll help other people. Because for me, I'm never so motivated to exercise if I have a friend who's struggling with exercise and I'm like, oh, I'll exercise with you, right?
Right.
Friend who's struggling to meal prep, I really benefit from that structure too. And I have more motivation to follow through because now I'm doing it out of like wanting to help my friend.
Right. I love that. And I love the emphasis on community care. And I love how it doesn't have to look a certain way. There's this whole idea, at least here in the States, of like, you have to have your nursery done this way, and you have to buy every single damn gadget, and you have to have this and that. And I just love the idea of like, just stripping it down to the roots, and just, it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's, you get what you need however you need it. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, there's this product I found out about when I was pregnant, which I thought was really cool. It's called like Baby Box, and it was literally like a cardboard box, like a large cardboard box that was nicely decorated, and it was for your newborn to sleep in, because like newborns need like a space, like a bassinet or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want to buy a whole crib. Maybe you don't have the resources. So it's literally just a cardboard box.
Yeah.
It's big enough, and it's like nicely decorated, and the sides are high. So it's a safe space for you to put your newborn to nap. And like, it's a box. All you really need is a box.
It's so true. My cousin told me that. It was just like, forget all that stuff you're hearing. Like, you just need to be able to feed them and clothe them. And then you build it out from there. In fact, at the time that I had my daughter, they were sending people home with those boxes. It was like a SIDS awareness campaign to make sure that the kids slept on their backs. And so they were like these affluent families going home in a cardboard box with their babies. And they were so happy. They were never happier. Like, box. It's cardboard.
Yeah.
It's an Amazon box.
I think for some ADHD folks, the challenge of like, oh, I have to have all this stuff ready and whatever. keep them engaged, is going to work for them. And then for other people, it's going to be really overwhelming.
Yeah.
So like, I think, again, it's just about recognizing like, what is your flavor of ADHD and like, what do you need?
That's a good point. Like, it's a unique experience for every single person. That's so true. And you mentioned Barbara Luther. I did take that intro class at ADCA, and I love Barbara. She's so cool. She's so nice. Yeah. So the last question I have a question here. I have two, but you had a hack to remind mothers how not to give into guilt and shame. And I don't know if you shared the hack at your talk or if you mentioned it, but do you know what I'm talking about? Because I don't.
I had a hack to remind them not to give into guilt and shame.
Yeah, it was one of those external kind of reminders to yourself. Maybe, but we don't have to go down that road if you don't remember either. But yeah, it was just a mantra or something you tell yourself to kind of jolt yourself.
Was it like from one of my videos, maybe?
I don't know. It had mentioned when you were on that ADHD Palooza, but I can't remember if you actually shared the hack or if you just said you had a hack. I can't even remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I do have a hack for dealing with doctors, which is that there's an acronym called BRAIN, and it's a decision making, because decision making can be really hard in the moment for us, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And pressured.
Yeah.
And so this acronym could be useful for anybody with ADHD when they find themselves in a situation where they are being pressured to make a decision, like whether it's buying a car, with a lawyer, with a doctor, whatever.
Yeah.
And so BRAIN. So the first one is benefits. What are the benefits of this, whatever is being proposed?
Yeah.
R stands for risks. What are the risks, right? A stands for alternative. Are there alternatives to what you're recommending, right?
Yeah.
I is interval, and that means interval of time. So how long do I have to make this decision? Do I need to make this decision right now on the spot? When do you need to know by? How long do I have to choose? And then N stands for no. So what happens if I say no? Right? So you can absolutely guess how this would apply in a medical circumstance.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, we want to sweep your membranes. Okay, well, what are the benefits of that? What are the risks? Are there alternatives to a membrane sweep? How long do I have before I have to say yes or no to the membrane sweep? And what will happen if I say no, right?
Yeah.
Imagine even with, like buying a car, right? You're buying a car, the car salesman says, you should really buy this one. Well, what are the benefits of buying this one? What are the risks, right? Has the car had any recalls? Is it more pricey? Whatever.
Yeah.
Is there another car that's similar to this one, right? How long is this offer on the table for, right? And what if I say no? Is there another car you can sell me? Right. So again, just kind of like getting us back, because we can get really overwhelmed with decisions. So it gives us that more information to help us make a decision. And it also makes us like an informed consumer or like an empowered patient. Right.
Yeah. I love that so much. I remember all the brochures of like getting tested for this gene or that gene, or making sure your pregnancy is healthy. And like, I'm sure some of that was great, but it was so overwhelming. Like, how much of this do I need? And how much of this is like them selling me something? So, and I just, I even not being pregnant, I could see so many scenarios how that would help. That I'm going to have to write that one down. I'm going to have to. It's in the journal. Awesome. Yeah. And then my final question, you mentioned your mother living across the hall from you, and you guys would body double, right? You mentioned that at your talk about body doubling with your mom.
Yeah. So at the time that my baby was born, my mom lived across the hall, and she actually lives with me now. She lives downstairs. And I just found that like something like cleaning, right? It's not that hard. I know I can do it. I know it's not going to take that long, but I just could never get myself around to starting it. So I'd invite her over to watch Star Trek, because I was like, hey, you never seen Star Trek, you should see it. So I'd put on an episode, and then I'd just be cleaning the whole episode, listening to it because I've seen it, right? But just having it there, watching it while I'm cleaning helped me to get to cleaning. Yeah. Right. And that's still the case. I still don't find myself cleaning very often. So if I have somebody, whether it's my mom or just could do a Zoom call with a friend. Recently, I realized that I could just do TikTok live. So my new thing is like, if I body doubling, I'm just going to do like a TikTok live, and just anybody who pops in, I'll say, hey, what do you need to get done?
Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
But I also so I have like this space called the ADHD Studio, which is kind of a space that I came up with as an alternative to coaching, because I have like a little bit of a wait list for coaching. Yeah. And some some clients who I've been coaching with for a long time, and they definitely still benefit from some level of support, but they don't really need like a one-on-one coach.
Yeah.
So this is like a digital space where myself and another coach named Christy, we run like weekly body doubling sessions. So I think there's about 3 or 4 different opportunities to do body doubling, and I'm hoping to add more in the future. We do like drop-in coaching for anyone who's like not a client. So if somebody's like in that space and they're on the wait list for coaching, or they've already been a client, or they just like aren't a client, they could still like get a little bit of coaching. And then we do like monthly accountability challenges, and like we just like, it's like a place where people can like also post questions or like just meet each other.
Yeah.
So like people are starting to make friends, right? Like it's a pretty new space, but we've got sometimes the same people are coming to body doubling, so they're getting to know each other. So that's also like a place where I'm trying to create more opportunities for body doubling, both for myself and for others.
I love it. That's awesome. So wrapping up, where can folks find you and keep up with the workbook coming out and this group you just talked about?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Twitter and TikTok. On Twitter, it's just Dusty Chipura. On TikTok, I think it's Dusty the ADHD Coach. I do have a Facebook page, so that's my company is Vancouver ADHD Coaching. So you can, if you're a Facebook user, there's a Facebook page there. I'm a little active on YouTube. I'm trying to work on that. So I have a YouTube channel, which again is just Dusty the ADHD Coach. Not a lot of content on there, but working on it.
Yeah.
Then if people are interested in the studio, it's through a website called Mighty Network. So you can get the app, the Mighty Networks app, and you just have to search the ADHD Studio. And that's where people can kind of find. And so it's like a subscription service, but you get like a 2-week trial. So you can like try it out. And if you hate it, whatever, that's fine.
Yeah.
And all of my resources are always sliding scale and accessible to people who are marginalized or low income. So if people want to join the studio, but they can't afford it, just like send me a DM. If you're looking for coaching and you're worried you won't be able to afford it, like hit me up, like we'll work something out. But those are primarily the places.
Awesome. Dusty, thank you so much for being here, and hope you have a good one. Thank you for being on the show.
Ironically, now she's sleeping.
She's asleep now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow.
Just wanted to be part of the action.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
I've always wondered if weighted blankets could help me with anxiety. During the pandemic, it was the perfect opportunity to find out. Ever since the first night I have slept with my weighted blanket, I have had very relaxing sleep. Don't deal with insomnia nearly as often. And at a point where I don't want to sleep without it. It is that awesome. To find out which blanket I use, it's just so comfortable and so beautiful. Go to adultingwithadhd.com/mosaic and you'll see my favorite one, and there's many, many others to choose from.